War has always been about power, strategy, and survival. But in the ancient world, there were weapons so terrifying, so deadly, that they not only changed the course of battle, but also raised moral and ethical questions that still resonate today. These weren't just weapons, they were tools of fear, destruction, and, in some cases, dishonor. Weapons that, if left unchecked, could have forever altered the way wars were fought. In this video, we'll uncover 10 banned ancient weapons that could have reshaped history forever. Let's begin with the first, Scythian poisoned arrows. Top 1, Scythian poisoned arrows around 700 BCE. Picture this, a vast open plain, the air thick with the sounds of battle. The ground trembles beneath the galloping hooves of the Scythian cavalry, their bows drawn, arrows ready. But these are no ordinary arrows. These are weapons designed not just to wound, but to kill slowly, agonizingly, long after the battle has ended. This was the terrifying reality of the Scythian poisoned arrows. The Scythians, a nomadic tribe from the Eurasian steppes, crafted arrows tipped with a deadly poison. These arrows were not just ordinary projectiles. The poison was made from a mixture of venomous snake venom, rotting animal flesh, and human blood, a concoction so toxic that a minor wound could lead to a slow and painful death. The poison would spread quickly through the bloodstream, leaving the victim to suffer from fever, swelling, and immense pain. There was no cure. No healer could save you once the poison entered your system. To make matters worse, the Scythians' arrows were carefully engineered for maximum damage. The bronze arrowheads were shaped with 3 blades, designed to penetrate armor and lodge deep within the wound. Some of the arrows even had backward-facing barbs, ensuring that once the arrow was in, it stayed in, making it even harder to remove. Any attempt to pull the arrow out would only spread the toxic substance further into the body. The poison wasn't the only thing that made these arrows so terrifying. The Scythians, with their exceptional horsemanship, could launch their poisoned arrows with deadly accuracy from horseback, making them nearly impossible to catch. They struck swiftly and silently, leaving their enemies with little chance to react. For the ancient world, the use of poison in warfare was seen as dishonorable. The Greeks who fought the Scythians were horrified by these weapons. The great historian Herodotus, who documented their customs, described them as the weapons of dishonor. Yet despite the growing condemnation of poison in battle, the Scythians continued to use their toxic arrows for centuries, reinforcing the idea that in warfare, some tribes valued the effectiveness of their weapons more than the moral implications of their use. But what if these arrows hadn't been banned? What if the Scythians had continued to use them unchallenged throughout history? Could the use of poison in battle have become a common practice, forever altering the nature of warfare? Top 2, Hellenic flamethrower, 444 BCE. Imagine a fortified stronghold, a desperate standoff between 2 powerful armies, and the anticipation of a long and grueling siege. The defenders have prepared for everything, battering rams, siege towers, and ladders, but nothing could have prepared them for what was about to unfold. From the enemy ranks, a strange and terrifying weapon is rolled forward, a massive, fire-spewing machine that would change the way wars were fought forever. In 424 BCE, during the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta, the Hellenic flamethrower made its first appearance on the battlefield. This innovative device, used by the Boeotians, was unlike anything the Greeks had ever seen. Mounted on a wheeled frame, the flamethrower featured a large hollow beam filled with burning coals, sulfur, and other combustible materials. The Boeotians used bellows to force air through the chamber, intensifying the flames and projecting them through a nozzle mounted at the front of the beam. The result? A precise burst of fire that could strike with deadly accuracy, setting wooden walls and structures ablaze in seconds. Unlike traditional flaming projectiles, such as arrows or torches, the flamethrower allowed soldiers to control the direction of the fire, making it far more effective. The flames didn't just rely on chance or the wind, they were projected toward the target with focused intensity. When the fire struck the Athenian fortifications, it quickly spread across the dry wooden structures, forcing the defenders to abandon their position in a panic. The psychological impact of this weapon was as devastating as its physical effects. Soldiers accustomed to facing arrows Spears and other conventional weapons suddenly found themselves up against a wall of fire that could not be blocked by shields or armor. The flamethrower didn't just destroy the enemy's defenses, it shattered their morale, spreading fear and confusion among the ranks. This fire-breathing weapon marked a significant turning point in the history of warfare. It was a precursor to the more advanced flamethrowers that would appear centuries later, showing that engineers had already begun experimenting with the concept of controlled fire as a weapon. It also demonstrated the growing importance of siege warfare, as armies sought new and more effective ways to breach increasingly complex fortifications. But what if the flamethrower had continued to evolve? What if it had become a standard weapon in warfare, used not just in sieges but on the open battlefield? Could this early invention have changed the course of military history? Top 3 Aconite Poison Arrows, 400 BCE. In the ancient world, a battle could be decided by the might of an army, the skill of its warriors, or the strategic use of weapons. But there was one weapon that introduced an entirely new element, one that could strike from the shadows and take down an enemy without warning. This weapon was the aconite poison arrow, and it was as much about fear as it was about force. In the mountains of Greece, the deadly aconite plant grew, its tall purple flowers hiding one of the most potent poisons known to ancient civilizations. This plant, commonly called wolf's bane, contained toxins so powerful that even a small amount could disrupt the nervous system and cause a slow, agonizing death. The Greeks, aware of its properties, began to coat their arrows with aconite poison, turning a simple weapon into something far more sinister. The process was straightforward yet deadly. When an aconite-coated arrow struck its target, even a shallow wound could lead to rapid poisoning. Victims would experience burning pain at the site of the injury, followed by numbness, weakness, and difficulty breathing. The poison worked swiftly, interfering with the body's ability to control vital functions like the heart and muscles. If left untreated, the victim would die a slow, suffocating death. The use of poison in warfare was not new, but the aconite arrows raised the stakes. Unlike traditional weapons, which required physical skill to inflict damage, these poisoned arrows introduced a hidden danger, a danger that couldn't be seen or easily defended against. An enemy warrior might appear unharmed only to collapse hours later, with no explanation for the sudden onset of death. Ancient societies struggled with the moral implications of poison in warfare. It was seen as dishonorable, a cowardly way of fighting. Yet as the aconite arrows proved, it was also incredibly effective. Some Greek alliances, recognizing the danger of such weapons, attempted to establish rules that prohibited their use. These early attempts to regulate chemical weapons suggest that even in ancient times, there was a growing awareness of the destructive potential of poison in warfare. But the real question remains, could poison have become the dominant form of warfare if it had been left unchecked? What if these arrows had continued to be used, refined, and perfected over centuries? Top 4 Roman lead sling bullet, 1st century CE. In the ancient world, the battlefield was often defined by the clash of armies, the thundering sounds of cavalry, and the sharp sting of arrows in flight. But amidst the chaos of battle, there was a simple yet terrifying weapon that often went unnoticed, until it struck. The Roman lead sling bullet was small, unassuming, but its impact could be devastating. The sling was one of the oldest weapons known to man, but the Romans took it to new heights. Instead of using stones, they crafted small, heavy bullets out of lead. These projectiles were not just thrown, they were launched with incredible precision and speed. In the hands of skilled Roman slingers, these lead bullets could reach the speeds approaching 100 miles per hour, generating enough kinetic energy to fracture bone and inflict serious injury. Roman slingers were not just using a weapon, they were wielding a psychological tool. The sling bullets, often no larger than a thumb, could strike from great distances, making it difficult for the enemy to anticipate or defend against them. The bullets themselves were designed with an almond shape, providing greater stability and penetration. Their weight ensured that they maintained momentum and could cause significant damage even at long ranges. What truly set these bullets apart, however, was their psychological impact. Unlike arrows or spears, which were often seen coming, the Roman sling bullet would hit without warning. And to make matters worse, Many of these projectiles were inscribed with short, mocking phrases or insults, adding a layer of humiliation to the injury. Words like, "catch this," or the name of a commander were engraved on the bullets, turning each strike into a personal message. The Romans understood the power of this weapon. They used it in a variety of ways, often deploying slingers in formations to barrage their enemies from afar, softening them up before the main attack. Slingers could rain down a continuous barrage of projectiles, disrupting enemy lines and causing confusion long before a battle even began. The effectiveness of the Roman lead sling bullet lay not only in its physical impact, but also in its ability to disrupt the morale of the enemy. But just how much of a game changer were these simple projectiles in the grand scheme of warfare? Could the use of slingers and their lead bullets have shaped the outcome of battles, particularly in the Roman Empire's many conflicts? Top 5. Poison smokescreen, 4th century BCE. In ancient warfare, the battlefield was often a place of brutal, direct combat, spears clashing, arrows flying, and the roar of armies fighting for dominance. But what if the enemy didn't need to see you to strike fear into your heart? What if they could control the very air you breathed, choking and blinding you before you even saw the enemy? This is exactly what happened when the poison smokescreen was first used. Around the 4th century BCE, Chinese military engineers began experimenting with smoke as a weapon, a tactic that would revolutionize siege warfare. The concept was simple but terrifying: create a dense, toxic smoke that could fill the air and overwhelm the enemy. As the smoke cloud spread, soldiers found themselves unable to see, breathe, or fight effectively. Coughing, burning eyes, and suffocating lungs were the immediate effects, and some victims were driven into a panic, unable to mount any sort of defense. The poison smokescreen wasn't just a random cloud of smoke. It was carefully designed using specific materials. Sulfur, arsenic, and poisonous herbs were combined with combustible materials to create a thick, noxious cloud that could paralyze an entire army. The smoke was strategically deployed through tubes or containers, and in some cases, bellows were used to direct the fumes with pinpoint accuracy. In confined spaces, such as tunnels or narrow gates during a siege, the effect was even more devastating, as the smoke could quickly fill a small area, leaving the defenders no chance of escape. What made this weapon so terrifying wasn't just the physical effects, it was the psychological impact. Unlike traditional weapons, which could be seen coming, poison smoke was invisible. The enemy didn't know when it was coming, and once it was released, they had little chance of escaping its effects. Soldiers would be struck with confusion, fear, and physical distress, making it difficult to coordinate defenses or counterattacks. The very air around them became their enemy. This tactic also demonstrated the growing sophistication of ancient Chinese warfare. While most armies were still focused on conventional weapons like swords and spears, the Chinese were already experimenting with chemical reactions to gain the upper hand. The poison smokescreen represented an early form of chemical warfare, an unseen threat that could weaken an enemy without ever showing a soldier's face. But the question remains, if the use of poison smoke had spread across ancient battlefields, how would it have changed the course of warfare? Could the ability to manipulate the air itself have created new forms of warfare entirely? Top 6. Zhuang repeating crossbow, 208 CE. The battlefield is chaotic. Soldiers clash in hand-to-hand combat, the air filled with the screams of warriors and the sounds of weapons striking shields and armor. But then, a strange sound pierces through the noise. Rapid, rhythmic, almost like a machine at work. It's coming from a new weapon, one that will change the rhythm of ancient warfare forever: the Zhuang repeating crossbow. Around 208 CE, during the turbulent years of China's Three Kingdoms period, a new kind of crossbow was introduced, one that could fire multiple bolts in quick succession without the need to reload after every shot. This innovation, known as the Zhuang repeating crossbow, was an early precursor to the concept of rapid-fire weapons, something centuries ahead of its time. Unlike traditional crossbows, which required the user to reload after every shot, the repeating crossbow had a magazine mounted above the bow. This magazine could hold a stack of bolts, and with a simple lever mechanism, soldiers could fire several bolts in rapid succession, up to 10 in just 15 seconds. For an ancient battlefield, This rate of fire was nothing short of revolutionary. The ability to fire multiple bolts quickly, without pausing to reload, gave soldiers a significant advantage over their enemies. The Zhuang repeating crossbow was especially effective in defensive situations, where soldiers could keep up a constant barrage of projectiles, forcing their enemies to retreat or become disoriented before they even had a chance to get close. In sieges or during the defense of narrow corridors, the repeating crossbow could be used to devastating effect, disrupting enemy lines with the speed of its fire and the sheer volume of bolts. But it wasn't just the speed that made this crossbow so deadly. The bolts were often tipped with poison, which added a deadly element to the already overwhelming firepower of the weapon. The combination of rapid fire and toxic projectiles created a weapon that was as much about psychological warfare as it was about physical destruction. The enemy didn't just have to contend with the speed and accuracy of the bolts. They also had to worry about being poisoned with every shot. The Zhuang repeating crossbow represented a shift in military thinking. It was no longer enough to focus on the power of a single shot. The key to victory lay in overwhelming the enemy with speed and precision. This shift in strategy would shape the future of warfare for centuries to come, as the focus moved from individual strength to the ability to exert constant pressure on the enemy. But the question remains, could the repeating crossbow have become the standard weapon on the battlefield? If it had been adopted more widely, how might it have changed the course of ancient warfare? Could rapid-fire weapons have become the dominant force in military tactics much earlier in history? Top 7 Byzantine Greek Fire, 678 CE. In the heat of battle, few things could strike terror into the hearts of soldiers more than the sight of flames consuming everything in their path. But what if those flames didn't just burn the ship, but the very sea itself? This was the terrifying reality of Greek fire, one of the most feared and mysterious weapons of the ancient world. In 678 CE, as the Byzantine Empire faced relentless naval assaults on its capital, Constantinople, a weapon unlike any other was unleashed upon the enemy. Known as Greek fire, it was a highly flammable liquid mixture that could ignite on contact with air or even water. Once it was set ablaze, it could not be extinguished, not even by water. Ships, soldiers, and entire fleets could be consumed by this unrelenting fire, leaving the enemy powerless against its devastating effects. The Byzantines kept the formula for Greek fire a closely guarded secret. While the exact composition remains unknown to this day, it is believed to have been a mixture of naphtha, quicklime, sulfur, and other volatile substances, stored in sealed containers and propelled through tubes mounted on warships. These siphons would direct a continuous stream of blazing liquid at the enemy, setting their ships on fire before they could even get close to the Byzantine fleet. What made Greek fire so terrifying wasn't just its ability to destroy. It was the psychological shock it inflicted. The sight of fire erupting from a ship, followed by a spreading inferno that couldn't be put out, was enough to break the morale of any opposing fleet. The fear of Greek fire spread quickly throughout the Mediterranean, and its devastating impact allowed the Byzantines to maintain naval superiority for centuries. But the true genius of Greek fire lay not only in its destructive power, but in its secrecy. The weapon was a closely guarded state secret, and its use was limited to a select group of engineers and naval commanders. This secrecy allowed the Byzantine navy to maintain an overwhelming advantage over their enemies, using Greek fire to destroy invading fleets and defend their empire. However, the secret of Greek fire eventually faded. As the Byzantine Empire weakened, the knowledge of how to create and use this weapon was lost. Today, historians and chemists have speculated on the formula, but the exact ingredients remain a mystery. The disappearance of Greek fire raises an important question. How many other military technologies, once thought to be invincible, have been lost to history, their power never fully realized? Could the secret of Greek fire have changed the course of naval warfare forever? What if it had continued to evolve? Would we have seen the continued use of incendiary weapons, shaping the future of conflict across the seas? Top 8 Aztec Macuahuitl, 16th century CE. The clash of weapons fills the air. Shields are raised, swords are drawn, and warriors face off with fierce determination. But amidst the chaos, one weapon stands out: unlike anything the European invaders have ever seen. It's not a blade, not a sword, but a wooden club, its edges lined with razor-sharp blades made from volcanic glass. This is the macuahuitl, the terrifying weapon of the Aztec warriors, and it would leave an indelible mark on those who faced it. Crafted from wood and edged with obsidian, the macuahuitl was a hybrid weapon, part sword, part club. Its blades, made from volcanic glass, were so sharp that they could slice through flesh and bone with devastating ease. In battle, the macuahuitl served a unique purpose. Unlike European swords, which were often designed to kill, the Aztecs used their weapon to incapacitate enemies, capturing them for ritual sacrifice. This was the weapon of choice for warriors tasked with bringing back prisoners, not just for death, but for religious rituals. Each obsidian blade was meticulously crafted and set into the wood, creating a lethal edge that could inflict deep cuts, but also a weapon that could be repaired if the blades broke during battle. Unlike metal weapons, which had to be forged and shaped, the macuahuitl could be easily rearmed with fresh obsidian blades, making it a continuously formidable tool in warfare. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the New World, they were shocked by the weapon's cutting power. According to some accounts, the macuahuitl could decapitate a horse with a single blow. An astonishing feat for a weapon made from wood and glass. The Europeans, accustomed to steel swords, found themselves outmatched by the Aztecs' ingenuity. The macuahuitl wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol of the Aztecs' mastery over their environment. While the Europeans relied on iron and steel, the Aztecs crafted deadly tools from the resources available to them. Obsidian, a sharp, naturally occurring volcanic glass, became the key to their success. The weapon was a testament to the Aztecs' skill in turning nature's materials into deadly implements of war. But what makes the macuahuitl so remarkable is not just its physical power, but the cultural significance behind it. For the Aztecs, warfare was about more than just conquering land. It was about capturing enemies for sacrifice, ensuring the survival of the gods and the cosmos. The macuahuitl was as much a spiritual tool as it was a military one, designed to fulfill the sacred rituals of their people. Could the macuahuitl have influenced the future of weapons design had it continued to be used and refined? How much of the Aztecs' military prowess lay in their ability to innovate with the resources available to them? What if obsidian had been the material of choice across the ancient world instead of metal? Top 9. Poisoned Strasbourg bullet to 17th century CE. In the 17th century, warfare across Europe was evolving rapidly. Gunpowder and firearms were beginning to dominate the battlefield, changing the way wars were fought. Yet amidst the smoke and gunfire, one innovation stood out for its terrifying potential: the poisoned Strasbourg bullet. A simple musket ball, now made deadlier through the use of poison, it introduced a new level of cruelty to warfare, where even a survivable wound could lead to a slow and agonizing death. The concept was deceptively simple: coat the musket ball with a toxic substance and fire it at the enemy. The musket ball itself was already dangerous enough, as it would drive fragments of metal deep into the body, causing immediate injury. But by adding poison to the mix, a single shot could ensure a much slower, more excruciating demise. A wound that might have been survivable in normal circumstances became a death sentence. The poisoned bullet would spread toxic compounds through the bloodstream, causing fever, paralysis, and eventually organ failure. These poisoned bullets became a horrifying weapon, particularly during the ongoing conflicts of the time. The Strasbourg bullet added an extra layer of psychological terror to the battlefield. Unlike traditional weapons, which inflicted visible wounds, poisoned ammunition delivered a silent, invisible threat. Soldiers could not know for certain if they had been struck by a poisoned bullet, and if they had, their fate was often sealed hours later, as the poison took hold. The use of poisoned bullets raised serious moral and ethical concerns, even among the warring factions. While war was brutal, many believed that poisoning the enemy, causing suffering beyond the immediate violence of battle, was a dishonorable act. This growing concern led to the Strasbourg Agreement in 1675, which prohibited the use of poisoned bullets. This treaty between France and the Holy Roman Empire was one of the first known international efforts to regulate the use of chemical weapons in warfare. Despite the ban, the Strasbourg bullet didn't disappear immediately. Even in the face of moral opposition, military leaders sometimes use these deadly projectiles in times of desperate need. The psychological impact of poison bullets was significant. Soldiers could never be sure that their injuries were the end of their suffering. The fear of death from an unseen poison created chaos and fear in the ranks. But could these poison bullets have evolved into a standard weapon of war? What would have happened if the use of poison in ammunition had become widespread? Would it have led to more widespread use of chemical warfare in the centuries to come? Top 10. The fire-throwing catapult, ancient world. In the midst of battle, where soldiers rely on the sharp clash of metal and the noise of war, there comes a moment when the unexpected takes place. Imagine a siege, the air heavy with the scent of burning wood and the fear of what's to come. As the defenders brace themselves for the traditional onslaught of rams and ladders, they are suddenly faced with something they've never seen before. A monstrous machine, hurling fire with such intensity that the very ground beneath them trembles. This was the terrifying reality of the fire-throwing catapult. Used by ancient armies, the fire-throwing catapult marked a groundbreaking moment in siege warfare. Unlike traditional siege weapons that relied on brute force to breach walls, this new machine harnessed the destructive power of fire, a force of nature that could not only tear through fortifications, but also leave devastation in its wake. The device worked by launching burning coals and sulfur at the enemy, setting their defenses and troops ablaze, forcing them into a state of panic and retreat. What made the fire-throwing catapult particularly terrifying wasn't just its destructive power, it was the control it gave the attackers over an element as unpredictable and uncontrollable as fire. Unlike flaming arrows, which were subject to the whims of the wind, the catapult allowed soldiers to direct fire with precision, aimed directly at the enemy's vulnerable points. When the fire struck the wooden walls of a fortress, it spread quickly, consuming everything in its path. For the defenders, the experience must have been nothing short of terrifying. They were accustomed to the noise of battle, the clash of swords and the hiss of arrows, but this was something entirely different. The fire didn't just burn, it destroyed everything it touched, reducing fortified defenses to smoldering ruins. Even worse, the fire could not be extinguished by water, making it an incredibly difficult threat to counter. In many ways, the fire-throwing catapult represented the first real weapon that could project fire over long distances, making it a precursor to modern flamethrowers. It was an innovation that allowed armies to manipulate fire, turning it from an uncontrollable natural force into a deadly weapon that could change the course of a siege. But what if the fire-throwing catapult had continued to evolve? What if fire as a weapon had become a mainstay of military technology? Could the development of this weapon have revolutionized siege warfare even more? Or did it simply mark the beginning of something even greater, waiting to be discovered? As we've uncovered, these ancient weapons weren't just tools of destruction. They were powerful symbols of the evolution of warfare. Each one pushed the boundaries of what was deemed acceptable in battle, forcing civilizations to confront difficult questions about ethics and the consequences of technological innovation. From poisoned arrows to fire-spewing machines, these weapons didn't just change the outcome of battles, they changed the very nature of warfare itself. They remind us that even in the ancient world, societies were constantly evolving their methods of conflict, trying to gain an edge over their enemies. But with every new weapon came new moral dilemmas. If these innovations had not been banned or forgotten, how would they have shaped the history of warfare? Would the evolution of military technology have taken a darker turn? And how might it have impacted the way wars are fought today? If you found these stories as fascinating as I did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with more deep dives into history's most intriguing weapons.